I'm sitting here in my living room, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor, and I still can't believe how my life unraveled over the past year. My name is Scott, and I'm 60 years old. I used to think I had it all figured out, a decent job, a comfortable home, and a marriage that had weathered more than 3 decades. But like a house of cards, it all came crashing down when I was at my weakest. It started with a pain in my chest, sharp and insistent. I brushed it off at first, telling myself it was just acid reflux or maybe a pulled muscle. But the truth is, I knew something was wrong. When it finally landed me in the hospital, the doctors confirmed what I feared: a heart attack. I remember lying there staring at the sterile ceiling, feeling utterly vulnerable and, for the first time, truly alone despite the bustling nurses around me. My wife, Karen, visited me a few times during that hospital stay. We had been married for 32 years, and while the passion had long since simmered to embers, I thought we had an understanding, a partnership. But there was something different in her eyes, a coldness I couldn't quite place. She was distant, preoccupied, as if she had already checked out of our life together. I chalked it up to stress. After all, a spouse's medical crisis is no walk in the park. Little did I know, while I was confined to that hospital bed, Karen was busy orchestrating the next chapter of her life, a chapter that didn't include me. I found out she filed for divorce through a lawyer who showed up at the hospital with papers, and I could hardly breathe, not from the physical pain, but from the betrayal. I felt like a fool, blindsided at a time when I couldn't even stand on my own 2 feet, literally. As the days in the hospital turned into weeks, I slowly pieced together the puzzle. Karen had been seeing someone else, a man named Gary, who I later discovered was not only her lover, but also our financial advisor. The realization was like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a calculated move, a chess game where I was nothing but the pawn. I was discharged from the hospital with more than just a weak heart. I was a broken man. Returning to our home felt like stepping into a stranger's house. There were subtle changes, things I hadn't noticed before, a framed picture missing here, a closet less full there. Karen had been preparing for this, maybe for months, while I was oblivious, living a lie. The financial betrayal was worse. Gary, the man I had trusted with our savings, had been manipulating our accounts, siphoning money slowly and methodically. He had convinced Karen to liquidate some of our investments, spinning tales of market downturns and promising better returns. In reality, it was all smoke and mirrors to fund their new life together. I felt like I was drowning, struggling to stay afloat in a sea of anger and despair. I hired a lawyer, a tough-as-nails woman named Lisa, who came highly recommended. She had a reputation for digging deep and leaving no stone unturned, and I needed that. I needed someone who could see through the lies and help me reclaim whatever shred of dignity I had left. As the court date approached, I spent countless sleepless nights replaying everything in my head: the betrayal, the deceit, the loss. But I also spent those nights planning, determined not to let them win. I wasn't just going to roll over and let them take everything. The courtroom was intimidating, a place where lives get dissected under the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. Karen and Gary sat there looking smug, like they had already won. But they didn't know Lisa had found something, a crucial piece of evidence that would turn the tide. When the judge walked in, I felt a surge of anxiety coupled with a spark of hope. This was my chance to set things right, to expose the truth and to reclaim my life. Little did I know that the judge already had some inkling of the truth, a professional who had seen countless cases of betrayal and deceit, who could read people like an open book. This was more than just a legal battle. It was my fight for justice, for vindication. And sitting in that courtroom, I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every person who had ever been wronged, who had ever trusted someone and been let down. I was ready to see this through to the end. As the judge settled into his seat, a hushed anticipation filled the courtroom. I clutched the edges of the table in front of me, feeling the cool, hard wood beneath my fingertips. It was a tactile reminder that this was real. Every word, every glance, every heartbeat. Lisa sat beside me, her presence calm and resolute. She gave me a reassuring nod, a silent promise that we were ready for whatever came next. The proceedings began with the usual formalities, the clerk announcing the case number, the lawyers making their introductions. Gary's lawyer, a slick man with a predatory grin, wasted no time painting a picture of me as a negligent husband, too caught up in my own world to notice my failing marriage. According to him, Karen had found solace in Gary's professional guidance, and their relationship had blossomed from there. The narrative they spun was almost laughable, a soap opera version of betrayal, neatly packaged for the court's consumption. But I wasn't laughing. The bile rose in my throat, my chest tightening with a mix of anger and disbelief. These polished lies were more than just words. They were assaults on my character, my life. Lisa squeezed my arm gently, signaling it was our turn. She stood with the kind of confidence that commanded attention, an air of authority that made the room lean in. Her voice was steady, clear, each word deliberate. She dismantled their constructed narrative piece by piece, starting with the financial schemes. "Your Honor," she said, "we have evidence that Mr. Gary not only advised Mrs. Karen Scott to liquidate their joint investments, but directed these funds to accounts exclusively under his control." Her words hung in the air, heavy and damning. Lisa presented the paper trail, a meticulously compiled collection of transactions, emails, and ledger entries that laid bare the financial deceit. It was a tangled web, but Lisa untangled it with precision, revealing Gary's manipulation for all to see. I watched Karen's face, searching for a flicker of regret or shame, but she remained stoic, her gaze fixed ahead. Then came the moment I had been waiting for, the revelation Lisa had hinted at. "Furthermore, Your Honor," she continued, "we have reason to believe that Mr. Gary has a history of exploiting his clients. We've uncovered patterns of similar behaviors in his previous financial dealings." She handed a thick file to the judge, a dossier of past indiscretions and complaints lodged against Gary by unsuspecting clients he had swindled. The judge leafed through the documents, his expression unreadable, but I sensed a shift in the room, a subtle change in the air, a crack in the facade Gary and Karen had so carefully constructed. It was then I allowed myself a small, fleeting moment of hope. The rest of the day was a blur of testimonies, cross-examinations, and legal jargon. Each side presented their case, and I felt the weight of every accusation, every defense. Through it all, Lisa remained unyielding, her sharp intellect cutting through the noise, keeping us grounded in the truth. As the court adjourned for the day, I left the room feeling drained yet oddly invigorated. Outside, the sky was awash of oranges and purples, the sun dipping below the horizon. It was a reminder that no matter how dark things seemed, there was always the promise of a new dawn. In the days that followed, the trial continued, the battle playing out in legal skirmishes and strategic maneuvers. The tension was palpable, but I held on to the belief that justice was on our side. I found strength in unexpected places, in the quiet support of friends who stood by me, in the determination of Lisa, and in the renewed sense of purpose that slowly took root within me. Finally, the day of the verdict arrived. The courtroom was once again filled with that electric anticipation, everyone on edge as the judge took his seat. He began with a summary of the case, his voice calm and measured. I listened, my heart pounding in my chest, bracing myself for whatever was to come. "And in light of the evidence presented," he concluded, "this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. Scott. The actions of Mrs. Scott and Mr. Gary constitute a breach of trust and fiduciary duty. The court orders full restitution of the misappropriated funds and awards punitive damages to Mr. Scott." A wave of relief washed over me, so intense I almost couldn't breathe. I had won, not just a legal victory, but a personal one. The truth had prevailed. As I turned to Lisa, she smiled, a genuine expression of shared triumph. The journey to reclaim my life was far from over, but I had taken the first step. As I left the courtroom, I felt a sense of closure, knowing that no matter how much had been lost, I had found something invaluable, a renewed sense of self, forged in the fires of betrayal and justice. As I stepped out of the courthouse, a crisp wind swept across my face, carrying with it the scents and sounds of a city that somehow felt different now, as if the burden of my own disillusionment had been lifted, even if just slightly. The street was bustling with people, Their chatter and movement felt almost surreal, like I was waking from a long, dark dream and rejoining the world. Lisa walked beside me, her presence a comforting constant. I hadn't fully processed what this victory meant for me yet. It felt unreal, like I was suspended somewhere between relief and disbelief. We had won, but what did that mean for the future? The questions lingered at the edge of my thoughts. But for now, I chose to embrace the moment. "Congratulations," Lisa said, pulling me from my reverie. Her smile was warm, and it seemed to reach into the depths of my turmoil, soothing it. "You fought for the truth and won." "Thank you," I replied, my voice still tinged with the exhaustion of the fight. "I couldn't have done it without you. Your tenacity, your insight, it changed everything." She nodded thoughtfully. "Justice sometimes feels like a slow grind," she said, "but it's moments like these that remind us why we keep pushing forward." As we parted ways, promising to keep in touch, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for Lisa, but for the friends who had stood by me when everything seemed on the verge of collapse. Their support had been the foundation upon which I could rebuild, even when I wasn't sure I had the strength to do so. With the legal battle behind me, I drove back to the house that once felt more like a prison than a home. It was a modest place, nothing too extravagant, but it held echoes of a life I was now ready to reclaim. I walked through the door and took a deep breath, letting the past melt away with every exhale. The walls, once silent witnesses to my despair, now seemed to hum with a quiet resilience. I wandered through each room, reacquainting myself with the space. It was time to make it my own again, to infuse it with new memories, new beginnings. I spent the next few weeks decluttering, both materially and emotionally. I boxed up remnants of the life I'd shared with Karen, the photographs, the little mementos of the years we spent building what I thought was a shared dream. It was cathartic, the act of sorting through the physical and emotional debris, deciding what to keep and what to let go. The process was painful at times, especially when confronted with reminders of what once was, but it was also liberating. I was making space for myself, for healing, for whatever came next. It was like peeling away layers that had suffocated my sense of self, slowly revealing someone I recognized but had long forgotten. As days turned into weeks, routine became my ally. I returned to old hobbies, rediscovered passions that had been sidelined by the chaos of recent years. Painting, something I hadn't done in ages, became a form of therapy. The strokes of the brush, the colors mingling on the canvas. It was a reminder that creation was still possible, even after destruction. I also reached out to friends I hadn't seen in a while, slowly rebuilding a network of connections that had frayed during the ordeal. Their warmth and understanding were like a balm, reminding me that I was not defined by the betrayals I had endured, but by the strength I found to rise above them. Amidst all this, there was still the matter of the restitution and damages awarded by the court. It was more than just money. It was a symbol of justice, of the truth that had finally been acknowledged. With Lisa's guidance, I began to secure the financial future I had almost lost, taking steps to ensure that I would never be in such a vulnerable position again. But the most unexpected aspect of this journey was the forgiveness I found within myself. For Karen, perhaps not fully, but enough to unshackle the bitterness that had threatened to root in my soul. Holding on to the anger and resentment felt like drinking poison, hoping it would harm someone else. Letting go was an act of self-preservation, a declaration that I would not be defined by the actions of others. One evening, as the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, I stood on the porch, a cup of coffee warming my hands. The horizon stretched endlessly before me, a canvas of possibilities. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace, a quiet understanding that life, with all its complexities and heartaches, was a series of moments, each one an opportunity to choose how to move forward. And with that, I took a deep breath and stepped into the future, ready to embrace whatever came my way. As the days continued to unfold, I found myself grappling with a lingering sense of uncertainty. Winning a court case was one thing, but rebuilding a life from the scattered pieces left in its wake was an entirely different challenge. Yet every morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, I felt a renewed determination to forge a path forward. One morning, as I sipped my coffee and let the warmth seep into my bones, the doorbell rang, echoing through the quiet house. It was unexpected. Few people visited these days without notice. I set my mug down and walked to the door, my mind already racing through possibilities. It was Jake, an old friend I hadn't seen since before the chaos began. His easy smile was a balm to the residual tension I hadn't even noticed clinging to my shoulders. "Heard you might need some company," he said, his voice the same familiar mix of humor and sincerity I remembered. "Jake," I replied, surprised and genuinely pleased. "It's good to see you. Come in." He stepped inside, taking in the changes I had made to the house with a discerning eye. "Been doing some redecorating, I see," he noted, gesturing to the newly painted walls and the absence of Karen's presence in the decor. I nodded. "Yeah, it's a work in progress, trying to make it feel like mine again." "Looks like you're doing a damn good job," he said, settling onto the couch. "How have you been holding up?" We talked for hours, catching up on life, reminiscing about the simpler times when our biggest worry was deciding where to grab a beer on Friday nights. The conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter and the occasional reflective pause. Talking to Jake was like slipping into a pair of well-worn shoes, comfortable and reassuring. Eventually, the conversation turned to my recent ordeals. Jake had heard bits and pieces, but he wanted to know the full story. I told him about the betrayal, the financial ruin, and the arduous journey through the legal system. I spoke of the isolation I felt, the sleepless nights, and the gnawing fear that justice would remain elusive. "And now?" he asked, his gaze steady and supportive. "Now I'm figuring it out one day at a time," I replied, "trying to build something new from the ashes." He nodded thoughtfully. "You've always been resilient. You'll come out stronger for it." His confidence in me was both humbling and empowering. It reminded me of my own strength, the kind forged in the crucible of adversity. As the afternoon sun began its descent, casting long shadows through the windows, Jake rose to leave. "Don't be a stranger," he said as we stood by the door. "You've got a lot of people rooting for you." I promised to keep in touch, feeling a renewed sense of connection to the world outside my own struggles. Watching him walk down the path and disappear around the corner, I felt a warmth kindling within, a reminder that I wasn't alone. In the following weeks, I threw myself into the process of reinvention. I took on freelance projects that challenged my creativity, pushing boundaries I hadn't dared to approach in years. The work was demanding, but it was also invigorating, filling the hours with purpose and a sense of achievement. One evening, as I sorted through old files, I stumbled upon a letter Karen had written years ago, back when our dreams seemed aligned and our futures intertwined. Reading her words was like opening a time capsule, a glimpse into a world that no longer existed. There was a time when her promises had felt like truth, when her love had seemed unwavering. I felt a pang of sadness, not for the loss of what we once had, but for the illusion I had clung to for so long. That life was gone, buried beneath lies and betrayal, but I was still here. I was still standing, and that realization was more powerful than any words on a page. The letter found its way to the flames of the fireplace, its edges curling and darkening as it caught fire. Watching it burn, I felt a sense of release. It was a symbolic act, letting go of the past to make room for the future. As winter gave way to spring, I found solace in the rhythm of the changing seasons. The world outside my window was coming alive again, and with it so was I. Each day was a canvas waiting to be painted with new experiences, new memories. In moments of quiet reflection, I realized that the legal victory was only the beginning. The real triumph lay in reclaiming my life, in finding joy amidst the ruins and forging a path that was entirely my own. The journey wasn't easy, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. Standing on the porch one evening, as twilight faded into night, I knew with certainty that the future was unwritten. It stretched before me, vast and full of promise, waiting for me to step boldly into it. And I was ready. The days turned into months, each one a step further from the chaos and closer to a version of myself that felt more authentic, more grounded. I was learning to live alone, not just physically but emotionally, carving out space for my own thoughts and desires. There was a quiet power in solitude, a kind of strength I hadn't expected to find amidst the wreckage. One Saturday afternoon, as I wandered through the local farmer's market, I ran into Lily, a mutual friend of mine and Karen's. I hadn't seen her since everything went down, and for a moment I was unsure of her reaction. But Lily greeted me with a warm smile, her eyes free of judgment or hesitation. "Hey, it's been ages," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that was both surprising and comforting. "Yeah, it has," I agreed, relaxing into the familiarity of her presence. We spent the next hour catching up over fresh produce and homemade pastries, weaving through the bustling stalls. I told her about my freelance work, the changes I'd made to the house, and my plans to start a small consulting business. "You're really doing it," she said, admiration lacing her words. "Rebuilding." "It's inspiring." I shrugged, a modest attempt to deflect the praise. "Just trying to move forward, you know?" Lily nodded, understanding etched in her expression. "If you ever need anything, just call. You're not as alone as you think." As we parted ways, her words lingered in my mind, a gentle reminder of the support I had, even if it sometimes felt overshadowed by the past. The consulting business was taking off more quickly than I'd anticipated. Word of mouth was powerful, and clients seemed to appreciate my straightforward approach. I found a sense of fulfillment in helping others navigate the challenges I had once faced in my previous career. It was a new chapter, and though it was daunting at times, it was entirely my own. One evening, as I was wrapping up a project, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was concise, but loaded with implication. "We need to talk." "Karen?" I hesitated, fingers hovering over the screen. What could she possibly want now? Part of me was tempted to ignore it, to let the past stay buried where it belonged. But curiosity mixed with a lingering sense of unfinished business urged me to reply. "When and where?" Her response was prompt, suggesting a coffee shop not far from my place. I agreed, setting the meeting for the following afternoon. The decision left me restless, my mind replaying scenarios and questions I didn't know if I was ready to confront. The next day, I arrived early, the familiar smell of coffee mingling with the nervous energy in my stomach. I chose a table in the corner, away from the bustling crowd, and waited. When Karen walked in, I was struck by how little she had changed. She looked around, her gaze landing on me with a mix of apprehension and determination. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from mine. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What's going on?" She sighed, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her jacket. "I owe you an apology," she began, her voice tinged with regret. "For everything, the lies, the betrayal. I messed up." I listened, my emotions a swirling mix of vindication and the remnants of old hurt. Her words were overdue, yet hearing them brought an unexpected sense of closure. "I can't change what happened," she continued, "but I wanted to tell you that I've learned from it. I'm trying to be better." "How's that going for you?" I asked, genuinely curious, but careful to maintain a distance. "It's a work in progress," she admitted, with a small self-deprecating smile. "But I'm getting there." There was a pause, both of us reflecting on paths taken and the inevitable distance between them. I realized in that moment that while forgiveness was a personal journey, it didn't require rekindling a connection that was better left in the past. "I appreciate you reaching out," I said finally. "I hope things work out for you." Karen nodded, understanding the boundaries I had set with those simple words. We parted with a sense of mutual acknowledgement, not of what was lost, but of the growth each of us had pursued. As I left the coffee shop, a lightness settled over me, the kind that comes with shedding burdens long carried. I knew that life would continue to test me, to challenge my resolve, but I also knew that I was equipped to handle it. Walking down the street, I passed by a bookstore and paused, drawn in by the promise of stories yet discovered. I stepped inside, browsing through the aisles, letting the world of words offer solace and inspiration. It was in these quiet moments of introspection and exploration that I felt most alive, most connected to the person I was becoming. Every day was still a journey, and I embraced it with an open heart, ready for whatever lay ahead. As I stepped back into the sunlight, I felt a renewed sense of purpose, the kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and where you're headed. As the days unfolded, I found myself settling into a rhythm that felt authentic, a cadence of life that was unburdened by the past. My consulting business continued to grow, offering a stability I hadn't felt in years. Each new client was a testament to my capabilities and the journey I'd embarked on to reclaim my life. It was a Tuesday morning when I received an unexpected email that would once again stir the waters of my past. The subject line read, "Possible financial misconduct inquiry." Instinctively, my heart raced, a visceral reaction to those words. I opened it, scanning the contents with a mixture of dread and curiosity. The email was from a law firm conducting an investigation into financial discrepancies at my previous employer, the same company where Karen and I had worked together. There was a request for my input, given my former role as a financial analyst. For a moment, I sat there, the implications swirling around me like a brewing storm. I'd left that life behind, or so I thought. But here it was, an echo of old grievances and unresolved threads. Despite the unease that prickled my consciousness, I felt an obligation to respond, to see if my insights could help unravel whatever was buried in those ledgers. The next day, I scheduled a call with the firm. As I spoke with the investigator, a sharp, astute woman named Rebecca, she laid out the concerns: funds unaccounted for, transactions that didn't add up. It seemed that the financial misconduct was more extensive than anyone had realized. Stretching back over the years, I had been part of the company. Her questions were probing yet respectful, each one meticulously peeling back layers I had thought long closed. "Do you remember any unusual discrepancies during your tenure?" Rebecca asked, her voice steady, professional. I hesitated, memories flickering like old photographs. "There were a few times when the numbers didn't quite add up," I admitted, recalling late nights spent trying to balance accounts that seemed deliberately muddled. But whenever I raised concerns, they were quickly dismissed. "By whom?" she probed gently. I took a breath, the name forming on my lips instinctively. "By Karen. She was my supervisor at the time." There was a pause on the line, a moment where Rebecca processed the information. "Interesting," she said finally. "You're not the first to mention her name." I felt a chill, a realization that perhaps Karen's betrayal had extended beyond personal to professional. The anger I thought had subsided simmered once more, tinged with a sense of vindication. My instincts had been right, even if I hadn't fully recognized it at the time. We ended the call with an agreement to keep in touch, my mind buzzing with the implications. It felt surreal. The idea that Karen's actions had potentially undermined not just our relationship, but the very integrity of the work we'd done. That evening, as I sat with the weight of this new knowledge, I found myself wondering how deep the deception ran. Over the next few weeks, life continued its steady march forward. I poured myself into my work, using it as a buffer against the uncertainty lingering in the background. Yet as the investigation progressed, more details emerged. Each revelation a piece of a puzzle I was reluctant to assemble, but couldn't ignore. One afternoon, Rebecca called with an update that altered everything. "We've found evidence linking Karen directly to the unauthorized transactions," she said, her tone carrying the gravity of the situation. "She's been diverting company funds into personal accounts for years." The confirmation was both a relief and a blow. I had suspected, deep down, that there was more to her betrayal than met the eye. But hearing it confirmed reignited the hurt. It wasn't just about us. It was about a breach of trust on every conceivable level. "Thank you for your help," Rebecca added, her voice softer now. "Your insights have been invaluable to this case." As I hung up, I felt a mixture of emotions: vindication, sadness, and a lingering sense of disbelief. Karen's actions had finally caught up to her, and as much as I wanted to feel triumphant, all I could muster was a profound sense of loss for the potential she had squandered. That evening, I allowed myself the space to feel it all. I took a walk to clear my head, each step away to process the tangled web of my past. The air was crisp, the sky a canvas of fading light. I found myself at the edge of a small park, the quiet surroundings offering a solace I hadn't realized I needed. As I sat on a bench watching the world move around me, I thought about justice, not just in the legal sense but in the emotional and personal realms. Karen would face consequences for her actions, but I had already served my sentence in many ways. The time lost, the emotional toil, it was all part of a chapter I was determined to close with grace. In the days that followed, I focused on what lay ahead. I knew that the road to healing wasn't a straight path, but rather a winding journey with its own set of challenges and revelations. I leaned into the support of friends like Lily, whose presence reminded me that there was always a way forward, even when the road seemed obscured by shadows of the past. Every morning as I looked in the mirror, I saw a reflection of resilience, a person who had faced betrayal, loss, and the subsequent search for truth, emerging with a strength that could only come from within. And in that reflection, I found a quiet resolve, a promise to myself to keep moving forward, no matter what lay ahead. In the weeks following the revelation of Karen's financial misconduct, life settled into a new routine that felt strangely liberating. The burden of truth had been lifted, allowing me to confront the remnants of our shared past with a clarity I hadn't known before. It was as if the fog of deception had finally cleared, leaving behind a landscape of possibilities. Despite the upheaval, my consulting business was thriving. Each successful project was a testament to my resilience and the choice I'd made to carve out a path independent of the chaos Karen had left behind. I was no longer tethered to the memories of late nights at the office, trying to make sense of numbers that never quite added up. A futile exercise, as I now realized, in the face of deliberate deceit. Rebecca reached out again, this time to inform me that the case against Karen was moving forward with a substantial body of evidence. Hearing her confirmation was another step toward closure. The company had initiated legal proceedings, and it was likely there would be a trial. While I had mixed feelings about being involved, knowing my testimony could provide crucial insight into her methods and motivations, I agreed to help. There was an undeniable sense of catharsis in the idea of seeing justice served, but it wasn't the triumph I had envisioned. Instead, it felt like a necessary step in the journey towards healing, a way to finally sever the lingering ties that connected me to a chapter I had long since closed. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk reviewing a client's financial statements, an email from Lily popped into my inbox. Her timing, as always, was impeccable. She suggested meeting for coffee, and I eagerly accepted. Having her as a sounding board had been invaluable, her perspective offering clarity and grounding when my thoughts spiraled. We met at a cozy cafe we both favored, its atmosphere warm and inviting. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped us as we settled into a corner booth, the world outside bustling yet disconnected from our little enclave. "How are you holding up?" Lily asked, her eyes scanning my face with genuine concern. I took a moment to consider my response. "Better than I expected," I admitted, stirring my drink absent-mindedly. "It's strange, but there's a sense of relief in knowing the truth, even if it's painful." She nodded, a sympathetic smile tugging at her lips. "Sometimes confronting the truth is the only way to truly move on, even if it means revisiting old wounds." Her words resonated deeply, a reminder that healing is never a linear process. As we talked, I found myself opening up about the emotions I had suppressed. Anger, disappointment, but also a deep-seated sadness for what could have been. There was a part of me that still mourned the loss of the person I thought Karen was, separate from the actions that had defined her. "Do you ever think about forgiveness?" Lily asked softly, her question lingering between us like an unspoken challenge. I hesitated, grappling with the idea. Forgiveness was complex, a multifaceted journey that required me to confront my own vulnerabilities. "I don't know if I'm there yet," I confessed, "but I'm trying to find peace with it all for my own sake." Lily offered a reassuring nod. "That's all you can do. Take it one day at a time." Our conversation drifted to lighter topics after that, and as we parted ways, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I realized that part of moving forward was allowing myself to acknowledge the pain without letting it define me. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my work. Each new client brought a fresh challenge, a puzzle to solve that demanded my full attention. The complexity of financial systems and strategies provided a welcome distraction, a way to channel my energy into something productive and rewarding. As winter melted into spring, I found myself drawn to the idea of new beginnings. The world around me was awakening, the trees budding with promise, the air filled with the scent of renewal. It mirrored my own transformation, the slow but steady emergence from the shadow of my past into the light of possibility. One evening, as I sifted through old photographs, I stumbled upon a picture of Karen and me from happier times, a snapshot of a moment that now felt like a lifetime ago. The image, once a source of pain, now evoked a bittersweet nostalgia, a reminder of how far I'd come. Placing it back in the box, I realized that I no longer needed to dwell on what was lost. Instead, I could focus on what lay ahead, a future unburdened by deceit, defined by my own choices and the people who truly mattered. The road to healing was far from over, but each step forward brought with it a sense of liberation. In reclaiming my narrative, I had discovered not only resilience, but also an unexpected grace, a quiet strength born from the ashes of betrayal, ready to embrace whatever came next.